Today, we are joined by Michael Pless of Real Bucs Talk. We are going to be breaking down everything you need to know from Bucs versus Falcons Week 1. We're also going to talk the latest on the Jamel Dean restructure. A lot of interesting theories floating around. We're going to get to the bottom of it and more on today's Cannon Fire podcast.
I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head to the side. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. Joining us on the show today, I want to say first-time guest, but I don't know. I feel like I have done a show with Michael Pless. Maybe it was ages ago. Maybe it was 7 years ago, and I have just forgotten entirely. But, ladies and gentlemen, from Real Bucs Talk, the Michael Pless joining the show today. Very excited to have you on the Cannon Fire podcast, Michael. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I'm excited to be 1-0 as far as Buccaneers go, and yeah, thank you for having me on. It's awesome to be here. Absolutely.
We've got plenty to dive into, and I really wanted to bring you into this conversation because a lot of what we're going to talk about today, outside of the Jamel Dean thing, is going to be some of the X's and O's here on the offensive side of the ball. And you guys do great work, especially with your film reviews. People can check that out on your Substack. I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit on the show today. So let's dive right into it. Before we get into some takeaways from Bucs Falcons, talk about the state of this Bucs team, we kind of have to talk about the elephant in the room here, and that is Jamel Dean. The Buccaneers have restructured the contract of cornerback Jamel Dean, and Dean has agreed to take a pay cut in exchange for being a free agent in 2026. And this isn't just like nickel and dimes, Evan. This is a good chunk of change for Jamel Dean here, who, in my opinion, the way that I look at it, does he just want to have a say-so in the narrative of where he ultimately ends up playing post-Tampa Bay? Because as of right now, I mean, maybe this relationship can be fixed, but it seems like the Bucs might be doing him a favor in allowing him to maybe hit the market in a more favorable fashion.
It certainly seems like it's the first step in a process of like a divorce, basically. So it's essentially a trade-off, right? So Jamel Dean takes a pay cut, but the Buccaneers shorten his contract essentially, and he was scheduled to be. A lot of people actually thought that, because I had a couple people ask me, they were a little bit confused when the news broke because they had thought that Jamel Dean's contract was actually up after this year. It wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be up after next year. So he was under contract for the next 2 seasons, including this one, and that wasn't the case. So now that is the case. He is scheduled to be a free agent after this season. And I mean, look, there's a lot of fans out there that do not like Jamel Dean. There's been a lot of hate on Jamel Dean, whether it's justified or not. I think some of it is justified. A lot of it is not. I think the Buccaneers could do a lot worse at corner than Jamel Dean, but he has struggled at times, especially last year. So essentially, it's a trade-off, right? It allows Dean to hit the market. One, when he's 29 years old, he's about to turn 29 in, I believe, October. So he's going to be 29 hitting the market, not 30. So that he'll still be in his 20s hitting the market. And when you look at the class, I think like Tariq Woolen is a guy who's out there. But if he resigns in Seattle, like Jamel Dean might be one of the better outside corners available in next year's free agency class. So it's supply and demand. And if a team's looking for a corner, Jamel Dean could end up getting paid a lot more than I think a lot of Bucs fans would be willing to pay him. So I think that's part of it, but it definitely seems like if the Bucs were invested in keeping Jamel Dean, certainly seems like shortening his contract isn't something they would do. And also, if Jamel Dean planned on staying in Tampa Bay longer, I don't know if he'd be doing that as well. I think it's, like I said, it's that first step towards kind of, all right, the writing's on the wall here.
Michael, what's your read on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Evan said there. I think that was well said. When you look at it, I think you drafted, Benjamin Morrison, you brought in Jacob Parrish, I think they feel confident with those two. And I think if Benjamin Morrison wasn't hurt in training camp, I think there's a possibility that he could be the starter right now if he was healthy throughout training camp. They were really high on him. He was starting to get looks with the ones when he was practicing early on. So there was a strong intention there that, a move was going to be made, and that move could very well happen still, with Morrison coming back for this game against the Texans. So I think they just feel, confident about the cornerback room that they have. But right now you're putting, I guess, that initiative for Jamel Dean, because let's face it, guys play better when they're in contract seasons. And, obviously they want to put out good film. We're doing the same thing with Hassan Reddick. So, it gives you that extra motivation for Jamel Dean. And when he's motivated, that's when he's at his best, obviously. And I thought he had a very good week 1 game against the Falcons. When looking at the tape, there was a lot of good things where, coverage and allowing him to play a little bit more press man coverage was very good to see. Same thing with Zion McCollum. So I think they're just, I think it's the right move, especially with the assets that they brought on this offseason. And, we'll see what happens.
If this wasn't the report that was added to this as well, is that Jamel Dean handled things, quote, amicably. Apparently he had the right attitude throughout the process. So let me ask this. If this isn't a scenario where the Buccaneers kind of do Jamel Dean a favor here, do you think they would just trade him? Like, could he have been a trade candidate this year if the Bucs didn't want to work things out with the process that they have now started here, with him ultimately leading to free agency?
Yeah, I think they probably would have just, try to trade him, but again, you probably end up releasing him. And again, that I think that played a lot into Benjamin Morrison's development. They were feeling that he was continuing to grow and become that guy, but unfortunately he gets the quad injury and then he misses, installs and everything. We're going to see him probably this week on Monday night. So it'll be interesting to see how that rotation plays out if he does get actual snaps on defense, and it just provides that competition. And who knows? I mean, maybe they decide to trade Jamel Dean before, the deadline, but I think you want to keep that depth because we've seen it. The corners, they're bound to get injured.
Yeah.
It just happens. It's the name of the game. So you want to keep as much depth as possible there. You do have Bryce Hall, on the practice squad just in case, but I think for now, I think it's just more so motivation and also an opportunity for Jamel Dean. If he does, decide to go elsewhere in the offseason, he's got a good opportunity to get some good value as far as a contract.
Yeah, and Evan, like you said, man, I think Jamel Dean is a guy who is ultimately given too hard of a time by fans. I know that everybody likes to point fingers and give Jamel Dean a hard time, and I know that availability is your best ability, and Jamel Dean certainly has not always been available for this Buccaneers team, but I mean, they signed him to a 4-year extension, and a lot of people would agree that during that contract season, he played well. He played relatively well.
That was, I mean, and that's where, when you bring up the motivational thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think his best season of his career was his contract. Was like that year where he was going to be a free agent. He was the Bucs' best corner. Carlton Davis was still on the roster at that point, and I think he played better than Carlton Davis. So, yeah, I thought he ended up playing much better, and maybe that does help, right? So, obviously Jamel Dean didn't go into the season maybe expecting this, but now this is the scenario. He's got 16 games here to, just like Michael said, to put on some good tape and impress some other teams essentially, but also benefit the Bucs, because if he's putting out good tape, that means he's playing well. That means the Bucs defense is doing better as well. So I think it's kind of a win-win here. And I do think that I think the Bucs like Benjamin Morrison, and I do agree with the fact of I'm not sure trading Dean's the smartest thing in the world, just because I think we brought it up on the post-game show when we talked about, trading a guy like Rachaad White.
Right.
I think when you're in the position that the Bucs are in, I have a hard time trading away players for what's going to be day 3 picks, right? Like, if somebody offers you a 3rd-round pick for Jamel Dean, sure, but that's not going to happen. Those types of deals typically don't go down the trade deadline, especially for a guy who's going to be a free agent. So I would much rather have that depth, right? Jamel Dean has had injuries. Benjamin Morrison, one of the reasons he fell to the Buccaneers in the second round was because he had a hip injury. He had hip surgery, and then he spent all of training camp with a quad injury. So he's already had a couple of injuries in his career. Zion McCollum, has had banged up, from time to time here. So it's not like these guys are, going to be available 24/7. And I think when you're the Bucs in a position of where you're hoping to make the playoffs and make noise in the playoffs, I think keeping Jamel Dean is just it's way too more valuable than adding an extra 4th or 5th round pick.
Thank you to our live audience here on YouTube. Some of the Cannon Fire crew chiming in. Top Shelf 555 says PFF grades from week 1. Jamel Dean, 63rd out of 107 in the cornerback category. He says, but they need him for this season. I hope they move on from Dean next season. Tall Florida guy checking in says, I don't trust PFF grades. Jamel Dean was solid last Sunday. And then last but not least here, Sensei Kicks TV says, Jamel Dean wouldn't even look good on the Eagles. And our good buddy MK says, Jamel Dean is getting good film for Burger King. Have it your way. As you can see,
he does not like Jamel Dean, but a lot of fans that don't.
Again, as you can see, a wide array of opinions and takes here on Buccaneers cornerback Jamel Dean. Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But at the end of the day, I think that Jamel Dean, much like some of these other players who have moved on, he's played some great football in Tampa Bay. Again, got a 4-year extension that we just mentioned because he played awesome that season. But maybe he's just reached a point where after 6 years now in Tampa, it's just time for a change of scenery, I guess. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the writing that is on the walls with again, these things the Buccaneers have now put into motion.
Let me just put it this way. Before this restructure, I would have been surprised if Dean was on the 2026 roster.
Agreed.
That would have been a surprise to me. After this news, I think it's almost a guarantee. It would be very surprising if he was on the 2026 roster now.
I also think that something like this would be even less surprising if you hadn't heard about the Zion McCollum deal already.
Yes.
You know
what
I mean? Like
well.
that,
yeah.
Luke Gedeke, Zion McCollum, both of those deals getting done in the same week. It isn't shocking that you hear something like this the following week when a big deal like that is made. But let's dive into everything Bucs Falcons here. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of why we're here. We wanted to get the Jamel Dean update out of the way because he's still a Buck. He's still going to be on the roster. And as of right now, he's still going to be suiting up and playing games for this Buccaneers defense. We will see him week 2 on primetime in Houston. Can't wait for primetime, baby. So let's talk about Bucs versus Falcons here. And Michael, I think there's a lot of places we can start. I wanted to start on the offensive side of the ball. And again, there's multiple avenues we can go here. But I really want to highlight this run game. As we kind of break down big takeaways from this game, I want to talk about some big concerns. And really on the offensive side of the ball, we saw a bit of a slow start. Baker Mayfield, we saw a happy appearance from those, or an early appearance from those happy feet that he can get sometimes. Doesn't look super comfortable in the pocket, but something that was able to bail him out, I think, a little bit more under a Liam Cohen offense last year was the presence of not only Bucky Irving, but any running back in this run game. Yeah. There was just nothing doing for the Buccaneers against Atlanta. Did not run the ball well. They got all 3 backs involved. We saw Rashad White get a couple of carries. Sean Tucker get some carries. Bucky Irving get some carries. Should they have stuck with it a little bit longer? I don't know. But whenever they were trying to run the football, there wasn't much of anything going on. Let me get your overall impressions here of Josh Grizzard, his first game as a play caller, and then what the hell's going on with the run game? Because it was night and day, at least for week 1 compared to last year.
Yeah, I think, you have to start with the, shuffling or the breaking news of the offensive line. That just caught us all by surprise. You see that update, Graham Barton going to play left tackle. You have a practice squad player starting at left guard, give it his name is Michael Jordan, but, and then at center, you have Ben Bredesen, who's played there before. And these guys have played all these positions before, but at the same time, it is a lot to go into a game, on the road, have to know, certain signals, have to know communication. The crowd noise is playing a factor, all those things. And then, gel on the field and understand, where certain guys are going to be. So the run game, I think timing was just a little bit off. Certain guys getting to certain spots. Michael Jordan's not the most athletic guy. out there as far as movement goes. So there was some like timing issues that I saw. But there was also some creativity. I did like some of the things where they did on their outside runs. There was opportunities there. They just didn't click all the way through. We saw some that worked really well. I think Sean Tucker picked up a 7-yard gain on one of them. Another one, he tripped over his own feet. Unfortunate. Bucky had some opportunities, just couldn't get it going, from a standpoint. And the Falcons really did a good job. They were trying to force Baker Mayfield to take over and pass the football. They didn't want us to run it, which is understandable. You want to shut down that run. The Bucs did the same thing on the other side. So, yeah, I mean, schematically, I didn't see a bunch of what we did last year. I think it was more simple stuff, but there was some creativity with the outside runs that I saw. But you also have to just look at what they were trying to do and like getting guys moving, because we had a lot of guys pulling last year to create those open spaces and gaps. So I would say just give it time. It's something that hopefully we see improvement this week against the Texans, because they're definitely going to have to run the ball there. But yeah, I'm not too worried yet. Again, week 1 is it can trick a lot of people because it's a week where I'm trying to figure out how to the best way put this, but you can overcompensate for the week 1 results. So you just got to keep it even flow and understand that teams are going to get better as they get into the swing of things, because these guys they didn't play preseason football. A lot of these guys didn't play. I mean, and you throw out an offensive line that didn't play a snap in preseason together, and you expect them to go out there in week 1. And I thought they did a really good job given that circumstance.
There was one play, I think it was third. I think it was early in the game. Is when right after the Bucs failed to get this, they went for it on 4th down and got it. But it was 3rd and 1, and they handed off to Bucky Irving, and he's just stuffed. And I saw there was an angle on the film where Graham Barton is in the Tristan Wirfs role basically, and they ask him to do a Tristan Wirfs thing, right? Kind of like pull a little bit and block, and he just completely misses them, and that's the dude that ends up stopping Bucky Irving. I think we're understating, how important Tristan Wirfs is, right, to this offense and this offensive line in general. So while I do think the run game struggled to get going and it needs to get better, and just like Michael said, even like this week, Tristan Wirfs probably isn't playing this week. Like, they need to have a better showing this week in the run game. I do think that, but I also do think that that's why I'm not concerned long term, right? Because Tristan Wirfs should be back shortly, and I think that's a game changer for your offensive line. I mean, you're adding an all-pro tackle to your offensive line there, puts everybody else in their natural spots. Even though I thought the offensive line did well, on Sunday, that wasn't the best version, right? The best version of the Bucs offensive line has yet to be seen. So that's why I'm not overly concerned either, and I am curious to see also with the play calling as well. I think that may have been why maybe you do a little safer. Right? You don't really know what this offensive line is going to do. You have a lot of moving parts, a lot of new guys in new spots. You have a dude that was elevated off your practice squad, as a starter, basically. So, and I mean, he wasn't even on your team at the start of the camp. So it's definitely an adjustment there. And I think as the season goes on, the Bucs get healthier along that offensive line. I think the run game will naturally improve. And I think the play calling, I think you'll see that get a little more innovative as well as the season goes along.
Yeah, I agree. We've talked about it time and time again, not only with the Chris Godwin injury, but now Tristan Wirfs, who may have a timetable that's a little bit sooner than Godwin. So that's going to be some encouraging news for that offensive line. I think the more firepower you have, the more basically tools in the toolbox for Josh Grizzard to use in that scheme are going to lead to him trying to take a little more chances. I think, trying some things out, trying to see who athletically can really do what in this Buccaneers offensive scheme. As we continue to talk about the offense, wanted to get your thoughts, Michael, on Baker Mayfield, his week 1 performance. A lot of people, again, just like Jamel Dean, there's opinions all over the place about Baker Mayfield right now and how he played in that week 1 game. I think the fact of the matter is, early on, he was not comfortable. You can argue if he played well, you can argue that he put the team in jeopardy, but he was not very comfortable in that first quarter. Now, is this, again, as we talked about with the offensive line, is this a Baker Mayfield who didn't get very many preseason reps, didn't have to practice under pressure that much, so when the lights come on, he's got to shake off the ring rust. Is that kind of a factor here, or do you think that there is anything else at play? Baker, I think Baker should look fine week 2. Hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, because it is a primetime game.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's a combination of those things you mentioned. I think, preseason rust, I think definitely played a part. Not playing in the preseason, I think was a factor. And then obviously the shuffle of the offensive line, and he knew about that going into it. That was going to be the plan. But I think at times he was trying to go for that big play, and that's what they were doing early on. They were sending guys downfield. They were trying to get explosives, and unfortunately, I think he should have just, and he talked about this, he should have just taken the checkdowns underneath, and they were open.
Yes.
When you look at the film. So there was a lot of things where they were trying to get those explosives early on to kind of open up the Falcons defense and kind of alleviate. And they were hoping if they could hit some of those deep shots, maybe that would benefit the running game. It just didn't work out that way. But I'll tell you what Baker did well, and that was running the football himself, extending plays. We've seen it time and time again. The defenses just don't really key in on him. They don't have a spy for him, and he finds a way to make them pay with critical third down conversions or just getting extra yards. He also threw the football away out of bounds, which I really applauded. I was like, Baker, you can't I was so excited that he actually did that, like throwing the ball away, not taking sacks. He did have one sack on a pressure, but for him to avoid sacks and avoid turnovers, he did have some turnover passes that were dropped. So we are thankful there. Bucs had the same thing. They dropped interceptions. Both teams did. But him running the football and then making just probably the 2 best passes of his career to Ibuka. That's why he is, a very good quarterback in this league. And he made 2 really great plays, and that ended up being the difference in this game.
Yeah, I thought early on, we described it on the post game show. I said I thought he had, a little bit of happy feet. Maybe it was, lack of trust in the offensive line. It's the unknown, right? Yeah, he knows about it, but you don't know how they're going to react, right? It's a completely new situation. You haven't played in a game in front of these guys, and I think there were times where sometimes he got rid of the ball a little too quickly. Sometimes he didn't set his feet, which can lead to more inaccurate throws. I thought in the second half, he trusted the offensive line a little bit more, but I thought that was when he was the most inaccurate. Obviously the ball to Kate Otten. Otten doesn't run the cleanest route in the world, but also he's that wide open. Like you got to hit that guy. And there was a couple other ones, but like I mentioned, give credit where credit is due, though. He battled back, and mental toughness was a big deal, and he's able, because he could have very well have just lost all confidence right there and just went into a shell, right? And he battles back and leads a game-winning drive, which he's done on more than one occasion for the Bucs. So, yeah, I thought that was very good. Something that Sensei Kicks TV in the chat actually said, which I wanted to bring up, was interesting. We talk about the Bucs offensive line. Atlanta was the pop quiz. The real test for the RO line is Houston. And that's because Houston has 2 dynamic edge rushers, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Both of them combined for 23 sacks last year. They did not have a sack on Sunday against the Rams, and the Rams offensive line has been a little shaky the past few years. So I'm sure those guys are going to be ready to go on, for this game on Monday night. So the Bucs offensive line is going to need to play better, right? They played fine, especially given the circumstances, but with those 2 guys on the edges there, the tackles are it's going to be a big test, especially if they stick Graham Barton back there again. Like he's going to have a test. He is going to have a lot of stuff on his hands there dealing with those 2 guys. So hopefully they can. And I agree with you, Michael, that I thought I said it on the post game show. I thought the one thing that Mayfield consistently did well throughout the entire game was his legs. Use his legs, whether it was to actually run and gain yards or to just extend the play, find a man, or end up throwing it away. The one he threw away, he got hit and it ended up being roughing the passer, puts the Bucs in the field goal range. So yeah, I thought that's one of the things that he did really well, and he's done well for his entire time in Tampa. And I do wonder when are defensive coordinators gonna respect his running ability at some point, like a little bit more? He's obviously not Lamar Jackson, he's not Jalen Hurts, he's not Jaden Daniels, but like he can beat you with his legs, and he's willing to do it. It's not like he's one of those guys that can run a little bit but just refuse to leave the pocket. Like he will sometimes he bails in the pocket too early.
Yeah.
And that's an issue sometimes, but he can beat you with that. So that was good to see. And like I said, I don't think it was his best day. He's gonna need to be better, but the mental toughness to come back from that and still win the game was pretty big.
Got to recognize some Cannon Fire crew really quickly. Shout out to Joel Elrican. Just renewed his membership for the 12th straight month. So, Joel, you are the first year-long member of the Cannon Fire crew that we have had since we launched these YouTube memberships that, everybody loves so much. So, we really do appreciate you, Joel. Thanks for hanging out with us. He says, I can hear the Abuka chants and Ray J already. Go Bucs. Michael, before we dive into Emeka Abuka, because, he's the star of the show for the offensive side of the ball in week one, I really want to ask you a little bit more so about Josh Grizzard, his scheme, and taking shots at these receivers downfield. You had mentioned it that they came out aggressive. They were trying to set some things up deep downfield. Maybe this is a loaded question for week one. Maybe it's one of those things that we have to let it play out and ultimately let the sample size determine how we feel. But do you have any opinions on route concepts and kind of getting these guys open? Because I have heard from a couple of other people, and I'm sure that even we can watch, the first half of that game, it seemed like the offensive opportunities for Tampa, at least the wide receivers early on, were few and far in between, right? It just seemed like it was kind of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, pulling hairs to try and get some of these guys open. Meanwhile, the first, highlight touchdown that I am shown from Jacksonville versus Carolina is a wide open tight end just walking into the end zone, nobody 10 yards around him. Josh Grizzard and his ability to scheme some of these guys open. Your thoughts on that early on here?
Yeah, I think, there was some inconsistency for sure. The route running, some of the play design was a little questionable, but I do like the aggressive approach. I do like the first down passing attempts. I think that is very key, that he's trying to set things up with passing on first, and trying to get better yardage on first down, set up second and short, set up your third and mediums, and try to stay out of third and long situations. And those first two drives, 3 and out right away, and there was some things there that they were trying to set up, and Atlanta just did a good job of taking those things away because of how they were playing. Doesn't mean there wasn't open guys. Like I said early on, there was some check down options that were presented. We just didn't go to that. And that is something that I think when you look at last year's tape for the offense, they were trying to really get Baker in a rhythm early on with some check down plays, get some easy completions. And I think that is sort of, hopefully that's the way they're going to approach it this week against the Texans. But from an overall standpoint, I think when you look at the first half to the second half, the adjustments made by Josh Grizzard were very promising, and how he was able to utilize basically the same concepts, but run them in a different way to get things open. You look at the Abuka touchdowns, especially the last one. They ran that play like I think 3 or 4 times, and they just noticed things on film that everyone is gearing to stop Mike Evans. And what a luxury that is to have. And you can find the football to your other playmaker, and it worked out for them. So I think overall, again, it's probably too small of a sample size. You have to give some credit to the defense on the other team. I thought they did some good things on that side of the ball, but to stay with it and make adjustments, do some different things offensively, that was, probably the takeaway for Josh Grizzard.
I think another thing that factors into there is just the personnel. We mentioned that earlier. Again, having more firepower gives you more creativity in that aspect. So excited to see that evolve. But yeah, some early thoughts there. Evan, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought again, we're talking about a guy who hasn't been a play caller, right?
Yeah.
So I think he's getting his feet wet too. He's understanding, what he likes, what he doesn't like, what tendencies he might have as a play caller. Halftime adjustments, right, is another thing. Okay, take a look at what the defense is throwing at you in the first half. Okay, now you have an idea. Now you can sort of adjust and also see if that defense is going to be making halftime adjustments too. So how are you gonna adjust to their adjustments that they made to stop your offense? So yeah, I thought I agree with Michael that I thought they did some good things. But also, I thought there was some room to grow for sure. And again, it's week one. You had a quarterback that didn't play in the preseason. I mean, mostly most of the starters that didn't play in the preseason. You're down your best offensive lineman, arguably the best player on your entire team in Tristan Wirfs. You're still down Chris Godwin. You're still down Jalen McMillan. And I know like they knew that going into the game, so like it wasn't like they game planned to have all those guys and they all just went down. But it still makes a difference. Those guys are that good and they make that big of a difference. So I'm not overly concerned. I'm curious to see how it looks week to week, because I mean, look, Liam Cohen. I compare all three debuts, right? Dave Canales, Liam Cohen, and Josh Grizzard, and obviously this particular debut was probably the most pedestrian, I would say, out of those three in terms of offenses. But like it took, all Cohen and Canales, it took them some time, I think,
Yeah.
to sort of really get rolling here. It wasn't like just week one, boom, it was instant.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a lot of success, against Washington last year, but there was some ups and downs with the Bucs offense, throughout the year last year, and then they sort of hit a rhythm there late in the year. So yeah, like I said, I'm optimistic about it. I think the more, just like a player, the more reps you get, I think that the better you're gonna get eventually. So
All right. Let's just gush about Emeka Ibuka a little bit. I mean, this is okay. It's one of those things where, like, yes, if people went into the draft knowing that they were going to target a wide receiver and then ultimately coming away with Ibuka, I think people were, ultimately going to buy in a lot faster than they did with this guy. Because you remember, there were videos of draft night from the stadium when the Buccaneers announced wide receiver at 19. Half of the stadium went, what?
That's the thing. Yeah,
Right.
It's
So,
not.
I mean,
It wasn't really Ibuka
yeah.
himself.
Well,
It was
but
the wide receiver.
now it is a pick from Jason Light that just ages better by the day. But Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report said that in his, ages of covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he has never seen a more impressive rookie wide receiver play for this franchise. And that counts Mike Evans. Let's not forget that rookie season, Mike Evans came in a little overweight, had some hamstring issues. I mean, he's still potentially the greatest to ever do it in the history of the franchise, but oh my God, Evan. I mean, you really couldn't ask for much more from this kid in his first NFL start. You hear nothing but good things about him. It seems like we're all waiting for a misstep, but there just hasn't been one yet. Are you buying on Emeka Ibuka right now? I know we still have some guys, some firepower that we talked about to get back into this offense. You got to work Chris Godwin in somehow, but I mean, Ibuka is certainly the guy, and he looks like he's going to be a guy in Tampa for hopefully forever.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely buying in. I think my prediction is I think Josh Grizzard is going to be sort of pulling hairs, trying to figure out how to get everybody the football.
Yeah.
That's what I think is going to be one of his big challenges by week 11, week 12, once Godwin's back and McMillan hopefully is back by then. Supposed to be close to being back by then at least. I think that's going to be a challenge, right? How do I feed everybody, right? There's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and I think part of the reason is because of what Emeka Ibuka is doing and hopefully continues to do. So is he going to average 2 touchdowns a game? No, but like you're right, you couldn't really ask for a better debut, right? That's like storybook stuff. Not only do you score the team's first touchdown of the season, it gives them the lead. It's your first touchdown of your career, but then later on in the game with 59 seconds left, you catch the game winner. And not only that, you told Mike Evans that you were going to catch the game winner, by the way.
Called his shot.
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen that, it's a story on JoeBucksFan.com right now that Mike Evans had basically said in an interview to the media that he was talking with Ibuka like before, like in the huddle or whatever, and Ibuka had said like he wanted like a post route, and he basically said he was going to game one pretty much, and well, lo and behold, he did just that. So yeah, I mean, he has a chance to be a special player, a really special player, and I think it's great that the Bucs have him. Obviously, Jason Light did not pick him in April, knowing that Jalen McMillan wasn't going to be available for the first half of the season, and maybe Chris Godwin's recovery might take a little longer than they want. Like he didn't pick him because of those things. He picked him because he thought he was a really good football player, but you're seeing it now, and I don't think there's anybody complaining now about the 19th overall pick being a wide receiver. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody. I think if you interviewed those people that were booing at the stadium right now, I think those are the same ones that are clapping their hands on Sunday afternoon.
Michael, what do you think of this young guy here?
Yeah, I mean, I again echo what you guys are saying. He is special. He was really good at Ohio State. I think what's the records that he has at Ohio State? He led the team
all-time
I think
reception.
He's got the all-time receptions.
And that's a. It's not like there's nobody that comes out of Ohio State and plays wide receiver.
Right.
You look at the list, there is some dudes.
Yeah, so I mean, he's very impressive. I think if you go back to maybe Thursday Night Football when the Eagles were playing, a lot of people I saw some rumblings talking about Jahad Campbell and like, we should have taken this guy and all that. And then you see Servatier Dennis, make a normal play against Bijan Robinson, where that's just a tough thing to do, to get him down in open field, especially one-on-one. But yeah, Ibuka, I think the route running, the detail, it's all there. Very mature for his age. He is a pro's pro. And I think you talk about it when Godwin and McMillan come back, and I mean, someone's going to be wide open pretty much on every play, or at least have a good opportunity or a good matchup that they can exploit. And I think that's what it gets into. That's where the football is going to go. It's like whatever the best matchup is. And I think we saw that on Sunday. Ibuka had the best matchup and they targeted him because Mike Evans still draws so much attention, and rightfully so. I think that's how you have to play it. And I would expect Ibuka to continue on and just be consistent, be that threat out there. And hopefully the hope is Mike Evans starts to see less attention, but that probably won't be the case because he's Mike Evans.
Yeah. I'm glad that you name dropped Servatier Dennis. I think this is a good time to bring up the defense and really talk about some of the areas of this team. I wanted to talk about, before we talk about Servatier Dennis, though, I really wanted to ask about the pass rush. And I think that this is an interesting conversation because now that you've had a chance to watch the game again, you can see there were a couple of guys, especially in the interior, I think a little bit left to be desired from a Logan Hall. Kalijah Kancey, surprisingly, I think had a weak game for what we're used to from him. But he doesn't exactly have a lot of week one performances under his belt, so I'd rather have him out there than not at all. So I'm glad to see him out there. But Hassan Reddick gets a sack. Yaya Diaby, I thought, had a decent day. He does get the sack wiped away from the Jamel Dean face mask. But with that being said, Michael Penix looked pretty comfortable in the pocket at times. He's very decisive with the football. I think he's going to be a problem for a couple of teams. But again, if that Yaya Diaby sack never gets wiped away, and we just take this pass rush performance for what it is the tone a lot different from the fans about getting after the quarterback if the Buccaneers come away with 2 sacks? I know it's only one play, but I really thought that, for week one, and especially for Hassan Reddick showing up and giving us exactly what we wanted out of him, maybe it wasn't the flashiest sack in the world, but it was a 3rd down drive killer, and I can't think of any other play that you signed that guy to make. So with that being said, where are you at with this Buccaneers pass rush right now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel better. I feel better about it than I did, last year for sure. I think when you break it down, one thing that I noticed quite often is when Hassan Reddick had a one-on-one opportunity, usually he won and he found a way to get pressure for the most part. At least that's what I saw. It was a lot higher. Yeah, a lot higher efficiency than whatever we saw last year. And when they doubled or threw attention towards Hassan Reddick, you saw Yaya Diaby start to create some pressure back there and get some plays. So I felt good. The defensive tackle Vita Vea had his moments. You want to see that pick up, obviously. And I think it will as he continues to get reps and get playing time. And obviously, these guys didn't play in the preseason either. So once they get, their football shape into gear, I think you're going to see a defensive line that could be a problem. Kalijah Cansey, again, didn't have the best game. They kind of, they focused on him quite often as well, but he did well against the run, which was a big step up from last year. I thought he really showed well there, did a lot of different things in the run game. So there was a lot of steps taken forward. As far as like the backups and reserves, as far as pass rush, the only one that really stood out was Elijah Roberts to me. I thought he did some good things there. So I think it's still a work in progress, but I'm encouraged by the signs that we saw early on, especially when you need a third down stop. They got it, with a sack. And I thought that was encouraging for sure.
Yeah, I think it's about, turning some of those pressures into sacks, right? There's a couple times, Penix did a good job of escaping it. And he's done that, throughout his, college career and stuff as well. He's not, he's not the fastest guy in the world, and he does like to stay in the pocket, but he can evade a sack, and he did that a couple times on Sunday. Reddick got to him once, and obviously, like you mentioned earlier, that Diaby, ended up getting to him. I believe that was on a blitz as well. But the Bucs, I don't believe the Reddick sack was on a blitz. I think that was just a four-man pass rush, and that's what the Bucs have been looking for. That's what the Bucs signed Reddick for, to improve. They know that in order to get pressure, in order to get sacks, they can't just keep blitzing and blitzing and blitzing, because they simply they almost, there was a point last year where they just could not get to the quarterback unless they sent extra guys, and you can't live that way all the time as a defense, especially in today's NFL with how good some of these offenses are and these quarterbacks and wide receivers. I mean, you're gonna get torn apart. There's some teams that are just gonna eat you alive when you do that. So you got to be able to affect the quarterback with four guys, and the Bucs did that decently, I would say. I wouldn't say it was excellent, but I thought they did okay, and I'm encouraged and eager to see more, I guess I could say. And there's an opportunity here, because the Texans' offensive line is not the greatest offensive line in the world. It's actually one of the big reasons why they struggled so much last year, and CJ Stroud kind of hit like a little bit of a wall. They trade away Laramie Tunsil in the offseason. And I believe their starting center is actually going to be out for this game. So that's an opportunity there as well. They have another opportunity here. And yeah, they were playing against the Falcons offensive line that was a little banged up, right? They were missing their two right tackles, I believe. And then, you're going to be playing the Texans team that doesn't have the greatest offensive line. So consider me, cautiously optimistic, I'll say, about the pass rush. I want to see more. Pless mentioned the depth, right? I want to see a guy like Chris Braswell do more, right? In the time he's given. I want to see Anthony Nelson do more. Those guys, they brought back Anthony Nelson. They drafted Chris Braswell in the second round last year. They invested some stuff in those guys. And because if Reddick or Diaby goes down, I want to be able to have some confidence in either one of those guys. And right now, I don't have much confidence in either one. So hopefully they're going to be able to make some plays here coming up as well. But overall, the starters, I thought they played relatively fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we can talk about some of the shortcomings with the pass rush all day. Again, a lot of people are going to gravitate towards pressures and sacks and things like that, and kind of get lost in what else the defense is doing. As we continue to evaluate the defense from the top to the bottom here, week one, man, they were great in the run game. I think when you consider, again, who is in the backfield for Atlanta, Bijan Robinson speaks for himself. Tyler Algier is such an interesting player, because I tell this to every single person I know who doesn't really watch Bucs football or Falcons football for that matter. He is a Buck killer. And there are just some of those players that maybe aren't going to be as impactful to the rest of the NFL, but every time they play Tampa, it's like Barry Sanders in the backfield or something. I don't know what it is. Like Kyle Pitts is one of those guys. Kyle Pitts had maybe one of the best games of his career week 1 against Tampa because he usually just plays well against Tampa. Like,
well, there's a few other times he got open and the ball just didn't go to him.
dude,
But
he was running the hell out of those routes.
The Penix touchdown run, he put a move, he put Levante David in the spin cycle, and he ends up getting open. But really quick, before you move on from the run defense, it felt very 2021 like, where there was just nothing, and that's really the last time. The Bucs run defense has always been like decent, right, over the past few seasons, but like I wouldn't view it as like elite. I think it was pretty darn close to elite on Sunday.
They were top 5 in run defense for at least 3 or 4 years in a row. I think it was 2019, 2021, like you said, that last season of dominance in containing the run. But as we talk about run defense, I wanted to talk a little bit more about SirVocea Dennis because he is a guy who is, just like Jamel Dean, showing up on a lot of people's shit list this week, for lack of a better term. But I didn't think he was that terrible. Yes, he was benched. Yes, he deserved to be benched, but he came right back in and stuffed the running back and made a play. And if I'm not mistaken, he made 1 or 2 other plays throughout the rest of the game. Yes, he is still a bit green, still some areas to improve, but so many people are ready to give up on this guy, Pless, after week 1. Where are you at with SirVocea Dennis right now?
Yeah, I mean, when I watched the tape and I just went through it, the one time and just looking at his clips, and I thought he played pretty well. Again, he wants 2 plays back, obviously the touchdown to Bijan. Again, that's very
tough.
tall.
That's hard.
That's a tough ask. I mean, that's a tough ask. You really have to close that properly and get to a certain spot. And unfortunately he just didn't. And I think there was another play where he allowed the football over his head.
Yes.
But other than that, I mean, he played the run fantastic. He had tackles for loss. He did a lot of things well. And I thought he was in good spots as far as in coverage when dropping back into zone, doing good things there. And you have to remember, this guy hasn't played football in over a year. Like, he really hasn't played. And so I attribute it to these guys just need to play, and he's one of them. He just needs to continue to play, and I think he'll get better as we go on. As he gets more into better football shape, I think the mental capacity will start to ramp up, and you'll see the type of player that I think the Buccaneers are expecting. He was my pick for Buccaneers defensive MVP. I think he's going to be that good. Like,
wow.
I think he's got the ability. I saw it last year against Detroit. Like, the tape, I know it's a small sample size, but he was very impressive in that game. And I think we'll expect to see that if he can stay healthy. The flashes are very good, and they were in this game as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're looking at it, and I do agree. I think the second breakdown is much worse than the first one because, like you said, Bijan's a special talent, and when you give him that much space, I don't know what type of defense they're running.
It was pretty much man across the board. They blitzed 6. They had 6 guys going after the quarterback, and you basically had everyone manned up, and SirVocea had to cover a lot of ground to get to the running back.
Yeah, it was far. It was a long way, and you're given one of the best running backs in the NFL. A lot of space, a lot of time to work. That's a tough play. The second one, I mean, so he comes in and it's like a delayed blitz kind of, and then he decides and it's honestly, it's a good play by Robinson too, because he kind of like dekes him, like fools him a little bit, I guess you could say. Because he's acting like he's pass blocking, and then as soon as Dennis comes down to try and blitz, Bijan just sort of scoots out, and it makes Dennis, look kind of foolish. Which, I mean, yeah, that was a bad play. It's a play that ended up getting, he sat for a little bit afterwards. So clearly the coaching staff was not too thrilled with that either. I do think it's a work in progress. I think he's better than KJ Britt, right, than last year. Which obviously that was something that the Falcons attacked consistently last year with the middle of the field with KJ Britt and everything. Yeah. So I think he's an upgrade there. My concern is I'm just not sure how much of an upgrade. That's my concern. And again, like you mentioned, he's only had a couple, couple games, let alone starts. I mean, I think he's only played 17 games in his career. Last season was pretty much a wash. Like he pretty much missed the whole year. And I know the Buccaneers are very excited about him. So that's my biggest concern. I'm willing to give him. I'm not willing to say, well, yeah, Deion Jones needs to be the starter and this and that. Like, I'm not willing to go there, right? Like, this isn't 2016 Deion Jones. Like, just because you see a name, it's not the same dude. But I'm eager to see more, but at the same time, I am kind of a little bit concerned about, that running mate next to Levante David because, I mean, let's face it, the one area where Levante David has really slowed down has been the pass coverage. That's one area where it's kind of fallen off to where he's not as effective as he once was. So hopefully, Dennis can step up and be just a solid option. He doesn't need to be Superman out there, right? Because having Levante David next to you helps. You don't need to be an All-Pro player. I mean, look, if Pless's prediction comes true, and he is, we look at this at the end of the year and stuff, and we're like, wow, that guy's a dude. That's great. That's big for the future of the defense, especially since I think this is probably Levante David's last season in the NFL. I mean, you're going to be looking for a replacement there. Having a guy like Dennis instead of having to find a bunch of different linebackers, if you have that crossed off your list, that's big. But I'm just not 100% sure if he can get there. But I do think he can show flashes, and he did on Sunday at times. It wasn't all just like awful. So he did have, but when you have those two explosive plays happen, critical times. One of them results in a 50-yard touchdown. The other was a critical third down there. You're going to get highlighted, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the Bucs are, I mean, it's evident the amount of stock that they are putting in Servassier Dennis. He is your starting linebacker still. He is that running mate for Levante David, at least in 2025. Much like you said, Evan, I think the Bucs want this to play out because the last thing that we want is to have to replace Levante David. But if you're replacing Levante David and Servassier Dennis, I just, there's not going to be that many options for quality linebacker out there. So hoping he can develop, and I think he can, man. Just like you had mentioned, Pless, that Detroit game last year, he has the tangibles, he has the film. I think he has the physicality. He's just got to, I don't know, maybe settle down a little bit. We will see what happens with this Buccaneers defense over the coming weeks, especially with Servassier Dennis in the lineup. But we will wrap up with the secondary. And I think that we can all agree here, fellas, the secondary in that week 1 game. You can talk all day about bend but don't break and things like that, the big scores that they gave up. But overall in pass defense, I think really the big thing that we just want to see moving forward is we've got hands on the football. Nobody's catching them. That's kind of the problem, is that I think we had, 3 or 4 at least dropped interceptions from this Buccaneers defense week 1. They're doing a good job. Again, the main objective for Todd Bowles this offseason was to really stress in the mind of this defense to get your hands on the football. And plus, they are halfway there. But your thoughts here early on with this Buccaneers secondary. A lot of young guys in there.
Yeah, I think, you make a great point as far as just catching the football. Zion could have easily had 2 interceptions. You want to see those, especially after you give him that contract. You would have liked for him to cement it by, getting those interceptions. Jamel Dean, same thing, had an interception, went through his hands. But I think the big takeaway I took is there was more discipline in their coverage as far as an overall group, and also the tackling. The tackling was much better from a group standpoint. Jacob Parrish, that guy's a player. Like, that guy, he's a dude. He really tackled well. He has a couple misses. I know the Bijan Robinson, again, juked him out of his shoes, but that's going to happen. But the tackling overall, Tyke Smith at strong safety, leading your team in tackles with 11. He was outstanding. You talk about run defense, that guy was a star on Sunday. But the coverage overall, I thought, was better. It was more aggressive. There was just guys in position, and even if they did allow a catch, they were right there to make the tackle. And outside of the Bijan Robinson 50-yarder, you didn't really have many plays that were yak plays. Like, when guys caught it, we were right in the spot to make the play.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking and I made the joke on Sunday. I was like, well, I was like Zion McCollum. He's a true Bucs corner now because he signs the deal. He drops the 2 picks. One of them wouldn't have counted, right? Because they called the roughing the passer anyway. But and then he ends up getting hurt. So I was like, yeah, that pretty much checks out.
The
So
Buccaneer experience.
yeah, I mean that's again, you're not a Bucs corner until all of those things happen. Um, so I do agree that look, I mean, and Bowles has talked about that forever, right? Like literally at the combine in February, he was saying how need more takeaways. The Bucs had 7 interceptions last year. 7. I mean, that's too low of a number. I mean, if they want to get to where they want to get, that's got to be higher. I mean, you're not going to be able to. I don't think you're going to find a team that won the Super Bowl that only had 7 interceptions in the regular season. I just don't think that that's going to work. And I do agree that I thought the coverage was better. I thought Jamal Dean, we talked about it earlier. I thought Jamal Dean played a fine game. I mean, there's going to be people that look at, Diaby's sack getting wiped out because of the face mask. They're going to look at that. They're going to look at Dean falling down on the play that Winfield saved, which I'm not sure. Like, after looking at it, I think they're kind of playing zone. At least Dean was, because he passes him off to the second level and just there's nobody there. Luckily, Winfield was able to save it, but Dean sort of goes down to the flat. And when he goes down to the flat, that's when he falls down. So, but when people look at the broadcast and they see 35 on the ground and the wide receiver wide open, and it's 35, they're gonna have a field day. So, I thought Zion was solid as well. Tyke Smith, I thought there were some things in pass coverage that weren't great, but at the same time, we're looking at a guy who is playing strong safety for some, he was a nickel last year for the most part. So he's still adjusting a little bit as well. I'm willing to give him a couple of weeks here. So I still really like him as a player. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I'm encouraged by what I saw from the secondary, and massive to have Antoine Winfield Jr. back and healthy. And literally, we are having a completely different conversation right now. I think we're talking about how we can fix this defense right now if Winfield doesn't make the play that he does on Sunday. Because the Bucs would have lost that football game. I mean, that would have been it. So he's getting him back healthy is just a massive addition.
I think the parallels that we can always draw from Antoine Winfield, his impact on the defense, especially in those games against the Falcons, like you can count on 2 hands how many of those tic-tac highlight reel plays, punching the ball out from Desmond Ridder at the goal line, saving the day, this big-time pass breakup to prevent the go-ahead touchdown from Atlanta. Like, that's just the kind of stuff that when he's healthy, he has the ability to do for this defense. And I'm excited to see him return to form. A couple of years ago, he was the best safety in football. I would love to see that mentality return for Antoine Winfield Jr. All right, folks, it has been a show. Plus, I've got just one final question here before we wrap up and let you go. Looking ahead, week 2, Buccaneers on Monday Night Football, hopefully trying to get the primetime monkey off their back, if you will. Their record in primetime contests has not been favorable.
They have not won a game in the regular season with Baker Mayfield as their quarterback in prime time. Hasn't happened.
Thank you for the reminder.
I think of starters, qualified starters, he has like some of like the lowest numbers, just like in general, being in Cleveland and stuff like that. Hopefully they can get, like you said, that monkey off their back. Go ahead, Rhett.
Well, I mean, Cleveland gets what, 1 primetime game every 3 years, I think. So maybe it was just the law of average while he was there.
Yeah, but it's usually against like the Jets or something.
Right, yeah.
So maybe you can get lucky.
Thursday Night Football special. Pless, what are you looking forward to most from Tampa Bay here in week 2? It's primetime stage. You get to face off against C.J. Stroud and hopefully get some revenge for what he did all the way back in his rookie season. But from the Buccaneers, what are you looking forward to most in this one?
Yeah, I think for this one, you're just looking for a little bit cleaner operation, especially on offense. I think just finding ways to start a little bit faster. I think getting those easy completions for Baker to get in a rhythm early on, and hopefully we see an improvement in the running game. I think that's going to have to be pivotal for this week if they want to have a good opportunity of beating the Texans, because you want to find ways to slow down that pass rush. And really the third thing that I want to see is the pass rush. Can we get after CJ Stroud with their banged up offensive line, missing a center. Now you're to your backup center. You have, some weaknesses on your tackles. So can you find a way to rush as a unit? And hopefully we can maximize coverage, because as we see, like I've seen stats where CJ Stroud, he's already deadly against the blitz. So you want to try to avoid that and try to use the blitz as a secondary option where you can surprise him a little bit more. But yeah, those are really the main things I'm looking for. Just a cleaner operation on offense, and defensively, hopefully keep that same kind of play as far as just being in position, making tackles, and hopefully coming down with some interceptions, catching the football.
Michael Pless of Real Bucs Talk, we want to thank you for your time jumping on the show today. Where can people find you and some more of your great content?
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. This is awesome. I can talk Bucs football all day, as you guys can tell. But yeah, I mean, you can catch us on Real Bucs Talk on YouTube. We're also on Substack now. We got some great exclusive content over there. We have a really cool film study of Benjamin Morrison versus Ohio State. So he's going to play probably on Monday night. So that's someone I'm looking forward to seeing on the field. Catch us on Twitter as well. We do some things over there, drop some free content. So yeah, man, it's I'm really looking forward to the season, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to it. I think you and Mark do a great job with that show. And again, the film studies you had mentioned, the stuff on Substack, it really is great, guys. Make sure you go check it out at Real Bucs Talk. YouTube, Twitter, social media platforms, they'll find you. They know that you're out there, podcast platforms as well. You can find our show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. Check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What have you got in the hopper for week 2, my friend?
Yeah, gonna have the Q&A with the Texans blog. I forget the name of the Texans blog for SB Nation, but stay tuned later this week. Gonna be having that. So just a perspective from the enemy, basically, sort of getting a an opponent's perspective, and getting an inside look at what the Texans do well, what don't they do well. So stay tuned for that on BucsNation.com, and also coming this week on the Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel. If you guys haven't checked out our best and worst from Sunday's game, that dropped yesterday, so go ahead and check that out. But also later on this week, we'll have betting the Bucs and also players to watch for the Bucs primetime game coming up here. Looking to go 2-0 for the 5th straight season. So in the 4th straight in the Todd Bowles era. So they have not been 1-1 in a long time. But the last time they were 1-1, they won a Super Bowl. So it might not be that bad. They lose.
Can't complain there. Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And please check out the Rondé Barber Show. I have the honor of putting that together with the wonderful people over at WFLA. Tomorrow morning, first thing, bright and early, we are recording a brand new episode that should be dropping sometime during your Wednesday. Be on the lookout, YouTube and all podcast platforms at the Rondé Barber Show. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and our very special guest, Michael Pless from Real Bucs Talk. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to all of our people in the live chat. One last time, MK, Luis Torres, Edwin Hernandez, Pickle Dog, Corey Richardson, Sensei Kicks TV, Rashun Adams, Just a Person, Christopher Cole, and we cannot forget the Cannon Fire crew, Joel L. Rican. Thank you guys for a great show. We will see you later this week with more Tampa Bay Buccaneer news and headlines. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.